The billionaire had no interest in dancing with anyone until the black janitor walked in with her daughter and everything changed forever. What on earth is this? How dare she bring a child to the most prestigious ball in New York? Margaret Silverton's voice sliced through the air of the golden ballroom like a sharpened blade. Her eyes were fixed on Richard Williams, 32, who had just stepped into the grand hall of the Astor Hotel with her 8-year-old daughter Maya. In truth, Richard had no business being there. As a hotel janitor, her shift had ended at 6 p.m., 2 hours before the gala began. But Maya had left her favorite doll in the ladies' dressing room earlier that afternoon and cried so hard that Richard had no choice but to return and retrieve it. Security, Margaret raised a gloved hand, diamonds glittering under the chandeliers. "We have an intruder." The Silverton family's annual charity ball was a gathering of Manhattan's elite with ticket prices reaching $50,000 per guest. In her plain navy uniform, Richard stood out sharply among gowns worth more than her annual salary. "Mama, why is that lady yelling?" Maya whispered, clutching her doll to her chest. Her natural curls were tied into 2 neat braids Richard had carefully done that morning. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll just grab your doll and go," Richard murmured back. But 2 security guards were already blocking the exit. From across the room, Alexander Silverton watched the scene unfold. At 35, the heir to the Silverton empire was no stranger to the social theatrics his mother enjoyed creating. Yet something about the quiet composure of the woman and the innocent confusion on her daughter's face unsettled him. "Alexander, darling," Margaret approached with a smile that was sweet but dripping with venom. "Such a shame. People like that just don't know their place." Richard kept her head high as the toxic whispers rippled through the room. She had endured this kind of humiliation before. Growing up as the only black scholarship student in elite schools, she knew exactly how such stories tended to end. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," one of the guards said. "Of course," Richard replied with a strangely calm voice. "I'm only here to get my daughter's forgotten toy." "How convenient," Margaret laughed mockingly. "Right when the richest people in New York are gathered here." And then, with the blunt honesty only an 8-year-old could muster, Maya looked straight at Margaret and asked, "Why are you being mean to my mom? She works really hard to take care of me." The room fell silent. Margaret froze. Alexander noticed Richard kneeling to meet her daughter's eyes, whispering something that made Maya smile. In that simple gesture there was a natural grace, a quiet elegance that no amount of money could buy. "Do you know how to dance?" Maya asked innocently, then turned toward the entire room. "My mom dances really well. She teaches me classical ballet from YouTube videos." Before he realized what he was doing, Alexander was walking toward them. Margaret tried to catch his arm, but he completely ignored her. "May I have this dance?" Alexander extended his hand toward Richard. The entire room seemed to freeze. 200 members of high society stood in stunned silence. Manhattan's most sought-after bachelor had just asked a black janitor to dance. Richard looked at his outstretched hand as though it were a trap. But Maya whispered, "Go on, Mama. Show them how beautifully you dance." And then something extraordinary happened. Richard placed her hand in Alexander's. As the music began, she moved with flawless classical technique, each step so fluid that the entire room seemed to hold its breath. She danced with the poise of a professional ballerina, her elegance so undeniable that even Margaret realized she had gravely misjudged this woman. What no one in that ballroom knew was that this dance was only the first step in a far greater plan, one that would forever change the world of these privileged onlookers. If you're wondering how a janitor could possess such refined ballet skills, and why Alexander would risk his social standing for a stranger, stay tuned. Because this story of prejudice and extraordinary willpower was only just beginning. The music ended, but the echo of her perfect performance lingered in the air. Richard had danced with such precision that even the professional musicians in the orchestra were momentarily speechless. As she and Alexander stepped apart, the 200 guests remained frozen in absolute silence. "No. Impossible," Margaret muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "How could someone like her have learned classical ballet?" Maya ran to hug her mother, beaming. See, Mama, now everyone knows how amazing you are. Richard held her daughter close, but her eyes never left Margaret's. In that look, she recognized something she had seen 15 years ago, the very same glare that had once crushed her dreams. Alexander. Margaret hissed, tugging at her son's arm. We need to talk, now. But Alexander couldn't take his eyes off Richard. You dance like a professional. Where did you learn? The question struck Richard straight in the heart. For a split second, memories came rushing back, threatening to pull her under. That was a long time ago, she replied curtly. A long time ago, Margaret stepped closer, her eyes narrowing like a predator closing in. Because I'm certain, given your circumstances, that receiving formal training in classical ballet would have been impossible. It was at that moment Victor Hartwell, the famed dance critic for the New York Times, approached. He had been watching the performance with growing astonishment. Excuse me, he said, fixing his gaze on Richard. But that technique, I recognized it instantly. That's the style of the Royal Ballet School, and I only know one dancer who ever moved exactly like that. Richard's blood ran cold. She gripped Maya's hand tightly. We have to go. Wait. Victor pressed on, ignoring her clear discomfort. It can't be. No, that's impossible. Richard Richardson died in a car crash 15 years ago. The name exploded in the room like a bomb. Margaret's face drained of color. Alexander frowned in confusion, but a few of the older guests began whispering among themselves. Richard Richardson, an elderly woman murmured, the prodigy who was set to become the first black principal dancer at the Metropolitan Opera House. Maya turned to her mother, bewildered. Mom, why are they talking about someone who's dead? Richard took a deep breath. 15 years of running from her past. 15 years living under a new name. 15 years believing she had escaped. But the past has a cruel way of returning always at the moment you least expect it. Because Margaret's voice cut through the air, cold and triumphant, her daughter's mother is not who she claims to be. The truth was, Richard Richardson had once been New York's ballet sensation. At 17, she had been accepted into the Royal Ballet School on a full scholarship. By 20, she was training to become the first black principal dancer in the Metropolitan's history. Her future was dazzling, almost certain, until the night Margaret Silverton appeared in her dressing room. You have talent, Margaret had said that long ago evening. But talent isn't enough. This world has its rules, and one of those rules is some doors will never open for certain kinds of people. Richard had laughed in her face. My talent will speak louder than your prejudice. We'll see, Margaret had replied with an icy smile. A week later, fabricated intimate photographs of Richard flooded the press. Baseless accusations of drug involvement appeared out of nowhere. Sponsors withdrew. The Metropolitan severed her contract. Within a month, Richard Richardson was ruined, disgraced, and cast out of the dance world. She vanished, taking the surname Williams, swearing never to set foot on stage again. She worked whatever jobs she could, cleaning waiting tables, just to survive and raise Maya alone. Now Margaret's voice dripped with sugar and venom. Once famous Richard Richardson, what an extraordinary coincidence that you should appear at a gala hosted by the very family who once helped you so much. Alexander looked between the two women, sensing a tension he didn't yet understand. Mother, what are you talking about? I'm talking about justice delayed, Margaret smiled. Your new friend is not just a cleaner. She's a professional liar who deceived the entire ballet world 15 years ago. Maya tightened her grip on her mother's hand. Mom, are you okay? Richard looked at her daughter, then at Margaret, and finally at Alexander. She had spent 15 years believing she was a victim. But standing in that ballroom, surrounded by the predators who had destroyed her life, she realized something that changed everything. She was no longer the naive 20-year-old caught off guard. She was now a 32-year-old woman who had survived everything they'd thrown at her. And this time, they wouldn't catch her unprepared. You're right about one thing, Margaret Richard said, her tone sharp enough to make several nearby guests pause. I'm not the same woman you destroyed 15 years ago. What Margaret Silverton didn't know was that the woman she had tried to crush for over a decade hadn't just survived, she had been quietly preparing. And now, stepping back into the world that had once rejected her, Richard would prove that some people don't just rise after a fall, they soar higher than ever before. 3 days after the gala, Margaret Silverton moved with the precision of someone well-practiced in destroying lives. She activated her web of connections like a spider spinning its threads. Principal Williams Margaret said over the phone to Maya's school head, "I'm concerned about a situation involving one of your students, Maya Williams. I have reason to believe her mother may be involved in unsavory activities." Across town, Richard was in a small apartment with Maya, but she wasn't crying, nor was she running away as Margaret had imagined. She sat at the kitchen table, eyes steady and cold, doing something she had sworn she would never do again, drawing on the skills she had honed over 15 years of survival. Maya played in the living room, blissfully unaware of the storm that was gathering. "Mom, why are you looking at those old papers?" "Just sorting through a few things, honey," Richard replied, eyes fixed on the documents she had kept all these years. A birth certificate, proof of residence, and most importantly, detailed medical records and photographs stamped with dates, each telling a story entirely different from the lies Margaret had spread 15 years ago. The phone rang. It was Dr. Patricia Chun, the vice principal at Maya's school. "Mrs. Williams, I need to discuss a matter that has just been brought to my attention. Some influential parents are questioning whether Maya should continue attending here given certain allegations about your past." Richard took a deep breath. 15 years ago, a call like this would have shattered her, but now she only gave a cold, controlled smile. "Dr. Chunwa, I completely understand. Let's arrange a meeting. I have information that can clear up those allegations." When the call ended, Richard pulled from a drawer an old yellowed business card she had kept for years. David Kumar, private investigator and reputation restoration specialist. He had given her the card 5 years earlier after accidentally discovering she was the long-missing Richard Richardson. David had once been an investigative journalist before becoming a private detective specializing in cases where the powerful used their influence to destroy innocent people. When they first met, he had offered to help her for free, but she had refused. She hadn't been ready to face the past. "David, this is Richard Richardson. I think it's time I accepted your help." 2 hours later, David was sitting in her kitchen, eyes bright as if about to witness justice in motion. "Richard and never stopped investigating your case," he said, opening a thick file. "Margaret Silverton didn't just destroy you. I found at least 6 other talented women whose careers she's wrecked over the past 20 years. He spread photos and documents across the table: a classical pianist, an opera singer, 2 stage actresses, a sculptor, and a novelist. Every one of them was either Black or Latina. Every one of them had a promising career, and every one of them had been taken down the same way: fake photos, fabricated accusations, and sponsors pressured into cutting ties. Maya wandered over, curious. "Mom, what are these pictures?" "These are the stories of brave people, sweetheart," Richard said, pulling her close. "People who were hurt," David added, "but who might one day see justice served." And here's the interesting part: Margaret didn't act alone. She used a crisis PR firm. In plain terms, they create fake narratives and destroy anyone who threatens the order they want to preserve. Richard studied the documents, her gaze as focused as if she were reading a complex musical score. "Do you have proof? I've got financial trails, leaked emails, and recordings of certain conversations. But I need more. I need her to fully reveal herself." For the first time in days, Richard smiled, not with joy, but with the icy calm of someone who finally saw the entire board. "David, what if I told you Margaret Silverton is about to try to destroy me again in the next few days? And what if I told you that this time, instead of running, I'm going to let her almost succeed? That's dangerous. If she gets a convincing enough story out, she won't." Richard cut him off, her voice so certain it startled even her. "Because this time, I'm not a naive 20-year-old who thinks talent is enough. Now I know exactly how she works." David frowned. "What are you planning?" Richard took out her phone and showed him a WhatsApp group chat. Margaret thinks I'm just a frightened janitor. She has no idea that in the past 15 years, I haven't just survived, I've been learning. The group chat was from former employees of the Astor Hotel where Richard had once worked. But they weren't just janitors. Among them were waiters, security guards, front desk clerks, and drivers, the invisible people who saw everything and knew all the secrets of the elite. You know the advantage of being invisible to people like Margaret, Richard asked. They do everything right in front of you thinking you don't exist. For 15 years, I've cleaned offices, emptied trash, and organized papers they forgot to hide. I've overheard suspicious conversations, seen sensitive documents, and even picked up printed emails tossed away without shredding. David began to understand. You've been collecting information, I've been recording everything. Richard stood, went to a cupboard, and pulled out an old shoebox. Inside were USB drives, photographs, printed documents, and tiny voice recorders. Margaret Silverton thought she was hunting down a weak prey, but the truth was, she'd been the one hunted for years without even knowing it. Maya looked at her mother with wide-eyed admiration. Mom, you're like a secret detective. Something like that, sweetheart. Sometimes when the powerful hurt others, someone has to gather the evidence to expose the truth. David picked up a USB drive. Richard, if this is what I think it is. Yes, exactly what you think. Margaret Silverton is about to learn that underestimating a woman who survived 15 years of forced hiding is the biggest mistake of her life. What Margaret didn't know was that her next victim had spent more than a decade and a half not just evading her, but preparing for the day she would be strong enough to strike back. And when someone underestimated for too long finally decides to unleash their full strength, the downfall of the powerful isn't just inevitable, it's spectacular. The next morning, Margaret Silverton awoke with the taste of victory close at hand. She'd spent the whole night preparing her finishing blow against Richard, an expose in New York's largest paper, accusing the fake ballerina of manipulating a naive billionaire for money. Alexander will see exactly what kind of scheming woman she is, she muttered, dialing the reporter she'd bribed. But when the line picked up, the voice on the other end was tight with panic. Mrs. Silverton, we have a problem. Someone just leaked details about our arrangement, and there's more documents that paint you in a very bad light, about other women you've helped push out of certain positions. A cold shiver ran down Margaret's spine. What kind of documents? Bank transfers, recordings, emails? The matter was now in the hands of the Times. The story would go live in just 2 hours. Across the city, Richard was at David Kumar's apartment, surrounded by reporters, civil rights activists, and lawyers. She was no longer the timid janitor. She was the center of a meticulously planned campaign about to unmask one of New York's most powerful families. Ladies and gentlemen, David announced, allow me to introduce not just Richard Richardson, one of the most gifted classical ballet dancers of her generation, but also a woman who has spent 15 years quietly collecting evidence documenting every abuse of power by the Silverton family. Alexander arrived at Richard's apartment just as the reporters began their live broadcasts. He'd received an urgent text from her. If you want to know the truth about your mother, come now. Richard, what's going on? He asked, noticing the cameras turning toward him. You're about to see who your mother really is, she said, handing him a tablet, and why she didn't just destroy my life, but the careers of at least 6 other talented women over the last 20 years. The first pieces of evidence lit up the screen audio of Margaret instructing a journalist to spread false stories, bank transfers to PR firms specializing in smear campaigns, and emails detailing plans to remove unwanted figures from New York's art scene. Alexander froze as he heard his mother's voice in one of the recordings. These people need to remember their place. When they try to rise above their station, someone has to remind them of reality. Oh my God, he whispered. She really did this. Meanwhile, Maya was at school, shielded from the media storm her mother had so carefully orchestrated. Richard had made sure her daughter was safe before setting off the bomb that would shatter the Silverton empire. At the Astor Hotel, Margaret was in the presidential suite when her own voice played over a nationwide broadcast. Someone like her should never step into our world. This is about preserving the natural order. She immediately tried to call her lawyers, but the lines were jammed. She called her journalist allies, but they had already turned their backs on her. In just a few hours, Margaret Silverton went from a respected society lady to a pariah. The phone rang. It was Alexander. "Mother, you need to explain these recordings. Alexander, darling, you don't understand. I did this to protect the family, to protect our legacy." "No. You did it out of pure cruelty," he cut in, his voice icy. "And now you have to face the consequences." On social media, the hashtag #HowJusticeForRichard was trending worldwide. Footage of Richard dancing at the gala spread with millions of views. The stark contrast between her natural grace and Margaret's cruelty created a story that moved people everywhere. David Kumar appeared on television, holding a thick file. Margaret Silverton used her influence to systematically destroy the careers of talented women, particularly Black and Latina women, whom she saw as threats to the so-called natural order of New York's art scene. Corporations began cutting ties with the Silverton Foundation. Museums took down the family's plaques. The Metropolitan Opera House announced an investigation into past discriminatory practices. In a desperate move, Margaret appeared on a televised interview. "These allegations are absurd. I have always supported diversity in the arts." But Richard was ready. During the live broadcast, David played a recording from just 6 months earlier, in which Margaret told a donor that certain kinds of people were infiltrating spaces that don't belong to them. The interview collapsed instantly. Margaret grew flustered, contradicted herself, then stormed off the set as the host continued rolling more evidence. That evening, Alexander came to Richard's apartment. Maya was doing homework at the kitchen table, unaware that her mother had just brought down one of the most powerful families in America. Richard Alexander said, "I want to apologize for my mother, for my family, for everything you've been through." "You don't have to apologize for someone else's sins," she replied. "But you do need to decide what kind of man you're going to be from here on out." "Mom, why are so many people talking about you on TV?" Maya asked. "Because, sweetheart, sometimes when powerful people hurt others, someone has to stand up and tell the truth. And today was our day to speak it." Across the city, Margaret sat alone in her mansion. The staff had quit. Friends no longer answered her calls. The charity board had voted her out immediately. She looked out over the city she once ruled and realized she had completely underestimated Richard Williams, the man she once dismissed as a trembling janitor who had spent 15 years quietly gathering evidence and building a network of allies to destroy her. Margaret picked up the phone to call Alexander, but he didn't answer. For 15 years, she had used her power to silence those she deemed unworthy. Now her own voice was silenced under the weight of her own actions. As night fell over New York, a new reality settled in the woman who had been forced into 15 years of invisibility, had reclaimed her voice and used it to rewrite the rules of the city's power game. 6 months later, Richard stood on stage at Lincoln Center, not as a janitor, but as the artistic director of New York's first fully inclusive ballet school. Funding came from public donations after her story went viral, and from an unexpected source, Alexander Silverton. 9-year-old Maya danced in the front row of her class alongside children of every race and background. "Mom," she whispered before the performance, "you turned pain into something beautiful." Meanwhile, Margaret Silverton lived in a small apartment in Queens. Her friends had abandoned her. Her charity had dissolved. She spent her days watching the ever-growing success of the woman she had tried to destroy twice. Alexander had taken full control of the family business, redirecting the Silverton fortune towards social and arts programs. The first donation, $10 million, went to Richard's school. "Why would you do that?" Margaret asked on one of his rare visits. "Because I've learned that our legacy shouldn't be measured by who we exclude, but by who we embrace," he said. David Kumar published a book about the case titled The Dance of Justice, which quickly became a national bestseller. Richard used the royalties to expand her school to several other cities. In a CNN interview, when asked about forgiveness, she said, "I forgave Margaret not for her, but for me." Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. but that doesn't mean the consequences of her actions disappear. Today, Richard's school trains over 500 children. Maya, who inherited her mother's natural talent, already planned to follow in Richard's footsteps with one key difference: she was growing up knowing her voice mattered. Margaret made one final attempt at redemption when she appeared at the school during a performance. Maya spotted her in the audience and, with the wisdom of a child raised on stories of justice, whispered to her mother, "I think she finally gets it. Gets what, sweetheart, that talent has no color. And if you try to snuff out someone else's light, you'll end up in the dark yourself." Richard smiled and pulled her daughter close. 15 years earlier, a young ballet dancer had been broken by prejudice and power. But from that wreckage, something stronger was born, a woman who turned pain into purpose, humiliation into inspiration. The real revenge wasn't destroying Margaret Silverton, it was building a future where other children like Maya would never endure what Richard had. It was proof that when someone tries to pull you down, the best answer isn't to sink to their level, but to rise so high they become irrelevant. If this story touched your heart and inspired you to never give up on your dreams, even when the whole world seems against you, make sure you subscribe. Because sometimes justice arrives late, but when it does, it rewrites history in a way no one can forget.